The Dental Download podcast is your source for insight from conversations with fellow dentists, specialists, and leaders in the industry. With new episodes every Monday morning, I'm your host, Dr. Haley. Let's get into this week's episode. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode. We are getting into some more nitty-gritty this week. If you've been listening to my last episode with my colleague, one of the owners at my office, Dr. Chris Bono, and I was just editing part 2 before recording this. That's going to be up next week. But it got me thinking, I've never made a specific episode about how I picked this office. I made a whole series of episodes of how in general my job search process went. I think it was 3 or 4 parts. I will link them below, but I wanted to make one source for you to know how I was ranking and comparing the different offices that I saw online, eventually took phone calls with, and then the even fewer that I went out to visit, and then how I ultimately decided on the office where I work. Because if it didn't come across super clearly to you in that episode with Dr. Bono and the one that's coming up next, and my past episodes with the other owner, Dr. Chad, which I can also link below, all the links. I absolutely love where I work. I think we are a gem of an office. I don't think that every office runs as efficiently and as positively as we do. We all love working there. We love each other. We love our patients. We love the impact that we get to make. And every single year, it just gets bigger and better. And there's something so special about that. So how the heck did I find an office like this? That's what we're going to talk about. And I do want to say, as much as I say our office is unique, our office is special, I couldn't find anything like it. There are many incredible offices out there. I have dentists on my podcast all the time that run very successful, very positive practices. So they exist, they're out there, you just have to find them. So hopefully by sharing this ranking criteria and questions to ask, you can feel more empowered going into your associate job search. So let's get right into it. I'm going to be going line by line through my own spreadsheet that I used now almost 2.5 years ago. I started looking for my associate position at the start of my 4th year. I ended up signing with this office quite early. I signed in September when I wasn't graduating until May, not starting work until June. So many, many months before I could even work. But that is because it was more of a rural location. So I was able to make sure that they wanted to lock me in early, which was nice. So I truly only considered between 3 offices, but I scouted out a lot, of course, as many of you probably are. So that's through job listings. I would email with practices or with recruiters. I would usually do a phone call with the practice owner or the recruiter, but I would not go out and visit an office unless I thought it actually had some merit for me and something where I could see myself working there. I also brought my boyfriend at the time, who then became my fiance during this process and is now my husband. I brought him with me as well. He didn't go to the dental office, but he would come to see the town because we were open to relocating. And I've made that very apparent in many episodes that I think it is well worth relocating for the right dental job, whether you're going to be an associate or an owner, because you can have such greater payoffs quicker if you're in an area where it can be profitable for you. You could retire earlier. You could have a less stressful life if you're not as worried about money. You could work less and still make the same and therefore have more time to travel, to actually spend time with your friends and family that might not live where you live anymore. And to me, that's very much worth the trade-off of moving away, because moving away gives you a lot more opportunities sometimes if it's the right office. So all 3 of these offices were a move away. Some were 3 hours, 4 hours from home. Some was only 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It really just depended. I had a handful of categories. Let's just go right through it. So I had a list of pros and cons in this spreadsheet. And then what I did was ranked every single one 0 to 10 in the spreadsheet, 10 being the best, being good. And then I also had a con list, and I also ranked those 0 to 10. So in that category, it was like negative points. If I gave it a 10, that meant that it was really bad. So it would deduct overall score of the offices, if you will. And then this was just one more objective way I could compare the practices. Ultimately, I really went with our gut feeling as a couple, which area we liked, which doctors we connected with the best, and just making sure I didn't see many red flags or any red flags. But this was a nice, concrete way, especially if you're a very type A numbers person, to compare different opportunities. And overall, it then generated a score for the office. And that is where my current office really blew things out of the water. So first was practice size and or patient volume. I'm going to go into kind of sub questions to ask how you can get these answered, because you don't really know from one phone call or one office visit or even a few phone calls unless they let you look at the books through their practice management software online. But a lot of times you don't even know what you're looking for as a dental student. So you would want to ask how many active patients have been seen at the office in the last 6 months. You may also ask how many patients do you have on annual hygiene visits. So you can look up how many they're seeing for the hygiene code for adult prophy, how many hygiene codes have been run in the last 6 months for perio maintenance, how many have been run for child prophy. That will give you, are there patients actually coming in for their routine treatment? Similarly, kind of asking about the patient base, you may ask, around here, do your patients come in routinely, or is this demographic for more of a fix it when it breaks? You may also want to ask about how much has the practice grown year over year. Your current amount of patients, has that been growing? Because they really shouldn't be looking for an associate unless they're growing more than they can handle as one doctor or two doctors, whatever it may be. What I've always heard is you want around 1,000 to 1,300 patients per doctor at a location. Obviously, you can handle more, or if your specialty, it would be much more because you're not seeing them as frequently. But for example, my practice has 4 doctors, which not all of us are working full time, and we have around 5,000 active patients that actually come in for recall and frequent treatments. So that makes sense for about 3 full-time doctors because 2 people are working part-time. And you might also want to know then, if they don't have year over year growth of patients, why are they even looking for an associate? Of course, that's a question you're going to want to ask. So you'll need to make sure that you understand what reason they have for seeking an associate. And by how they answer a lot of these questions, you'll know if they're really prepared for this or not, and if they're going to make this transition of you working there easy for you when you're already going to be going through a lot of changes of being in your first job, or is it going to be a bit of a headache and a little bit stressful? That doesn't mean you can't do it if you feel like they don't have everything totally ironed out for you yet, but knowing it's going to take a little bit more work on your end because they aren't as skilled in this associate situation. So you'll want to know if they've been growing in their practice size, and that will tell you, do they even need an associate or not? Maybe the doctor wants to scale back. That's another option too, but you'll really want to get details of what does that mean. Like truly, when I come to work here, will you be diagnosing treatment and it goes on my schedule? Because that's really what scaling back means. So they have to be comfortable to do that. The next one that were some of my most important, I have them bolded, was office feel and compensation, the e-budget, my husband's ranking. Those were some of the bolded categories that, even though in my little spreadsheet they were weighted equally, I would look at them to make sure that it was where I wanted, because truly I was mostly going off of my vibe and my feel and my gut instinct. So whether it was a 3 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. My office was a 10 out of 10, all the good vibes. So that was part of why I picked it. And then compensation. And if they are negotiable on said compensation, that is going to be your percent that you get. That is going to be your daily rate at the time of you starting. That might seem like a really big deal. What's your daily rate? But honestly, you should expect and figure out a way and a trajectory of how long they think it's going to take you to be out earning your daily minimum, and what you need to do to get there, as well as what they're going to do to help you get there. So that's really more what matters, is your percent of however you're being paid rather than the daily minimum, because ideally you're going to be out producing that very quickly.
So you want to know if you're being paid on production, adjusted production, or collections, and then the percent's going to vary. It could be as low as maybe like 28%, but you really want at least 30%. And then if you're being paid on production, it might be a little bit lower than if you're being paid on collection. Collection is money that the office actually gets versus production is what they're billing out for the work that you did. So that doesn't mean they're going to get paid all of that. So that's why they might pay you less of the production. For my office, it was a very competitive rate, so I was happy with that. And then you're also going to want to know what is all being deducted from your pay. If there's any type of draw in the pay month over month, quarter over quarter, those are kind of red flags. I feel like that just shows that the office is stingy. And then also if they're going to take away any lab fees, that's not necessarily a red flag. But you'll want to know, well, what are your average lab fees? And you'll want to calculate like a typical day of dentisting. How many fillings you think you'll do? Maybe you'll do 1 or 2 crowns, and maybe you'll do a denture and some extractions. Calculate how much you would make, and then deduct whatever they tell you the average lab fees are for those crowns, and then see how much you're going to make. Make sure it makes sense for the amount of work that you're doing, that you're being compensated fairly. Sometimes people will have the associates pay the entire lab fee. Sometimes they'll only pay the percent of what their percent is. So if you're at 32% collections, maybe you pay 32% of the lab fee or something of that nature. So again, I think more simple is better. I'm paid on percent of adjusted production and that's it. So I don't have a bunch of weird draws and deductions and all these different things, but I also don't bonus at all. It just is what it is, which again, I like more simple. So I'm happy with that. It's also not tiered. A lot of DSOs and even some private offices will try to motivate you with tiered pay percentages. So after your first K, maybe you get 32%. And then once you hit 60K, maybe you get 32.5%. And then once you hit K, maybe you get 33% or whatever. Again, I think that to me is annoying. And I would try to negotiate away from that. If they're not going to just offer you 32% or 33%, whatever you can negotiate within that range, then maybe it's worth doing it if you really think you're going to make that much more money. But for me, the peace of mind of being able to check that I'm being paid correctly month to month without all these weird tiers makes it worth negotiating to just a flat number. In my opinion, it's much more simple and fair that way. And I actually had that conversation with Dr. Chad a few months ago, now that I've been there almost coming into my 3rd year soon. I said, I appreciated that you had a simple pay structure and I preferred that. And he said, oh, that's interesting because originally I was going to do the tiered model. So it's nice to know that you preferred the more simple model. So again, all these things people might not even know. They just might hear from their friend that this is how they pay their associates. So that's what they offer you. It's never assume malintent or that they're trying to scam you or that they're trying to make things complicated. Simply figure out what you want and ask for it and then go from there. But compensation is huge, and I could probably do a whole episode about compensation, but those are some different questions to ask and things to look for. You can expect to maybe be paid as high as 35, maybe 36%. That's about as high as it gets, I would say, unless, again, you are paying for a bunch of other things. Maybe they'll pay you 40%, but then make you pay for a bunch of other stuff, and then it kind of offsets. But a good pay would be more like 35, 36%. And then an okay pay, maybe 32 or 31, and then below 30 is typically not ideal, but maybe you're in an area where dentists are not in demand and you have to accept lower compensation. Another category I had was advanced procedures. So I wanted to learn a lot beyond dental school. So I made sure that these offices were performing other types of dentistry that I did not have as much skill in so that I could be hearing about the treatment plans, looking at more full-fledged comprehensive care happening around me so I could pick all that up and become a better dentist just by association, by being in the room with these excellent clinicians and growing my knowledge and understanding and skills that much quicker. So that was another thing I was personally looking for. And that kind of goes hand in hand with technology. I had told different recruiters or people I talked to, I really did prefer same-day dentistry. I preferred being able to prep a crown and seat the crown same day. I wanted us milling in office or printing if that's what the office likes to do. My office has printing for other things, and then we also have milling for the crowns. So that was something really important to me. It wasn't a must have, but it was pretty close. I just knew that was the workflow that I felt made a better patient experience and it made more sense for me as a clinician. So that's what I was looking for. And there's all different types of technology too. Also CBCT, my office has that. So I wanted those more advanced technologies so that I could dip my toes into advancing in endo and implants. And you really need CTs if you're going to be doing more complex treatments such as those. I also mentioned my other highlighted item was CE. As you can tell from these categories, coming out of school, it was important to me to grow my skills. I wanted to become a better dentist. I wanted to broaden what I could offer and become better, faster, more efficient, more precise with the skills that I had. So I need CE to do that. So I wanted an office that had a high CE budget for me. My office's was excellent. So that was part of the reason as well, because I knew that they were invested in my success and invested in seeing me grow as a clinician. So sometimes they don't even put that in a contract. That is worth negotiating, in my opinion. If you're like, well, how much should I ask for? I would say you want to go and figure out what you want to learn. You have to reverse engineer it, just like you do anything in life. Do you want to learn endo? Figure out the endo course you want to take. Maybe it's 3,500, maybe it's 6,500. Bring that to them and say, this next year I want to take this course. I think you should pay for it as the office because I know that I'm going to bring more than that in profits once I have that skill. So that's how you propose an amount, and that's how you hopefully get them to say yes. You need to show them the value of sending you to this course, and that's a good way to start, that's what I want annually, because maybe this year I'm going to do endo, next year I'm going to do an even more advanced endo, or I'm going to do implants, or I'm going to do grafting, or something, again, that's going to bring value and money to the office, because at the end of the day, they are business owners. Another very important category is, how is the team, the people that you're going to be working with? Not only do you like them when you're visiting the office, talking to the team, what do they have to say about the office? What do they have to say about the owner? How long has the owner been there? What is the perception of the owner by the team and by the community and by the patients? What is the team's experience being there? How long have different team members been there? And what keeps them around? What do they love about the office? What do they think is important for you to know about their office before you decide if you're a good fit or not? Those are all things you can ask them. I like to eat lunch with the team. For people that eat in the office, that's what I did. And I got to discuss with them all of those things and more. And it's also a way for them to get to know you, to see if they think that you're a good fit, because a good owner is going to value the opinion of the team when they're deciding if they're going to hire you or not. So it's like a little working interview. You interview them, they interview you, but it's all very casual and fun. And you get to figure out if you both think that you'd be a good fit for the office. Next would be the owner. For me at the time, it was just Dr. Chad, and now Dr. Bono and Dr. Chad are owners. So Dr. Chad was the original owner, and now Dr. Bono, as you've listened to last week's episode, is a partner, and he was one of the associates there when I started. So all the doctors I was around were factors I was considering, but I wasn't making my decision purely based on other associates at the time, because I didn't know if Dr. Bono was going to stick around, right? So I was really basing myself off of who was locked into this office, and at the time that was the single owner, Dr. Chad. Do I like him? What can I learn from him? How is this going to support my career growth? Do I feel respected? Do I feel encouraged? Those are all things I would want to know. Also, like, do you look up to them as a human, as a person? Do you think they're a good person? Are they living a life that you would maybe want to live? There was another office I looked at where the owner's lifestyle was not what I would want for myself. I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty, but they didn't have the happiest home life. And that was a factor for me as well, because if that is something that this office is indirectly creating in their personal life, I don't necessarily want to sign myself up for that, as I'm a young person just starting to get my personal life and family life rolling. So Dr. Chad has a wonderful family life and a wonderful balance of the office and how it supports his personal life. So that was very reassuring to me. I also wanted to look at the work hours. This wasn't like I need to work 3 days or I need to work 4 days. Like, I would have worked 5, or I would have worked 3 days and a Saturday a couple of months. Like, I would have. It wouldn't have been ideal, but I would have. So this wasn't like an end all be all category for me either, but it was something to consider, was work hours and days worked. But my office, again, I work 3.5 days and it's lovely. Business training was my next category. I didn't know or didn't expect if I went to some of these offices if I would stay there forever, if I would buy or partner, or if I would leave and buy somewhere else or do a startup somewhere else. So I wanted to know that I was going to be getting good business training and transparent business training from whether it be the office manager or the owner, and that they knew what they were doing. I did not want to enter into an office where like everyone was confused and did not understand good business principles and good systems, because then I would be learning chaos and confusion. I wanted to walk into a place that knew what they were doing, and my office blows that out of the water. And they're also, again, very respectful and transparent and treat me like a leader, even though I am just an associate. So those are some things that I was looking for when it came to business training. And that was a category that I put on there. Next was more about living in this place. It was my husband's rating. How did he rate the place? I also looked at the friendliness of the community and the patients, the diversity of the community and the patients, and therefore the types of treatments I would probably be doing, and the scale of treatments that the patients could maybe pay for is another thing to consider. And then things to do in the area. So my office is more rural, so my perception was probably lower than reality once I actually started working there. Some of the things I've ranked my current office, looking at this old spreadsheet, I would much boost the rankings and the points in some of these categories, but my perception as visiting one time this small rural community was different than actuality, and it's even better than I thought it would be. So keep that in mind too, your perception of a place. Even though I chose to visit all these offices and make sure I stayed overnight, make sure I spent some time going to local stores and restaurants and seeing what the vibes are of the community and the type of people that live there, you still can't get a full feel of what it's like to live and work there without actually doing it. So it helped me shape my opinion, but it just goes to show that it can be even better, or could, I guess, be worse, that you can't know for sure till you really do it. So it's still a little bit of a risk in that way. Last couple categories were ownership potential, mentorship, benefits, and signing bonuses are also kind of parts of compensation. I did not have any benefits or signing bonuses proposed to me through any of my offers. They're not as common. More likely to get that probably from a corporate, which was not something I really wanted to consider. So that was a 0 for like every office that I actually highly considered. When it comes to ownership potential, a lot of times you don't fully know what that looks like from an office until you're in it and working it for some time, because they also want to know if they like you and they would want to sell to you or partner with you. So it's a little bit hard to rank this. And again, my ranking here was than I thought it could be, because my perception was that Dr. Chad is young and is not going to sell me the practice, which is true. So I gave it a lower score. But then as I've spent time working there, I learned that partnership is possibly an opportunity, which is a form of ownership. So now I would have boosted the score, but I don't know that as a dental student looking at this opportunity. So a lot of these scores, like I said, can change once you're in there, for better or for worse. In my case, I'm happy where I'm at. So all of these things have even improved since being there. I've made it clear that, so I don't need to go too heavy into this category, but mentorship, why it was important to me, and that obviously I think very highly of the doctors that I work with, and I feel like I have incredible mentorship. So I could get that perception even just from visiting a couple times, and I knew I could rank this highly versus other offices I went to. They were pretty clear that they wanted to scale back, or they didn't want to work the days that I would be there, or they'd maybe show me some things, or they'd give me the login to the CE thing that they use, but they didn't want to actually bring me in and be open and let me know how their brain works through challenging cases or business scenarios. And lastly, we'll talk about the cons category. So I had distance from family. I had possible like traffic annoyances, crime rates, housing costs, moving expenses, and living expenses. Those are about only the kind of cons I could think of at the time. So distance from family, I gave it a higher score if it was further away. So basically you wanted all the cons to be as low as possible. if you'd have like a really long, unpleasant commute where you're like bumper to bumper traffic. I was mostly looking at rural offices, so that really wouldn't have been much of an issue. But for me, that would be annoying to do a bunch of times throughout the week. So that would have been a con, but it didn't really affect me. Is it a safe area to live? We eventually knew we'd be having kids if we stuck around an office, so we wanted to make sure that we felt safe there. Again, a lot of these are rural locations, so they are pretty dang safe. Housing cost, again, a little bit lower perhaps because we're looking more rural. Moving expenses, this was kind of a similar one to distance from family. If we were moving further, then it would be worse or more expensive to move away, as well as being further from our family. And then living expenses is kind of similar to housing costs, but is it actually any cheaper to do things out there? One of the places I considered was less rural. It was more busy suburb. So all of those cons were actually a bit higher. It would have been more expensive to live and work there. And then at that point, why didn't I just stay in the suburb near my hometown instead of going to a suburb of another state? Was kind of how I decided that opportunity just didn't really make sense, right? So overall, a couple other things before we wrap up that you could ask. You'll want to, again, really clarify, like, what does my day-to-day look like at this office? How many hours are you currently working? And what would my hours look like? What would my daily schedule look like? How would we be divvying up new patient and planned treatment? How would hours progress as we go throughout my time as an associate here? Again, are they just seeing more patients at the office and you're both there, or are they leaving more days and you're picking up more days? I also think it's nice to just understand how things work. If you don't have same-day dentistry, or even for like removable pros and things, what labs are they using? How long is the turnaround? Are you paying for lab costs? Again, it's good to know. How do they do referrals? How much are they referring? There are a lot of orthos and endos nearby. Do they refer all of that? Do they do any in-house? Are they open to doing clear aligners and endo in office if you want to bring that in, if they're not doing it now? And when I say open, do they just say, yeah, sure, I guess? Or are they saying yes to the extent where they're going to buy you the Trio scanner to do Invisalign? Like, how much of a yes is it? Is it a strong yes or a yeah, maybe we'll see? Again, that doesn't need to be your yes or no for working at this practice, but it's good to just know how confident and is this owner that you're talking to when you ask these specific questions. They should have a very calm, simple answer for everything because they should already know what they envision for their associate at their office. So it shouldn't be catching them off guard. And if it is because they haven't really navigated an associate before, again, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's all things you'd want to work out before starting ideally so that you know that your vision aligns with their vision and you can avoid being unhappy ideally. And that's kind of what it all comes down to, is just making sure that you're both really clearly on the same page about what everything's going to look like from day 1 to month 3 to year 1 to year 3. What's the trajectory? What will treatments look like? How will patients be experiencing multiple doctors within the office? And make sure that you're happy about that, because most likely what they tell you is what's going to happen unless you can tell that they're kind of BSing you. And again, it'll be very easy. We're all smart. We can pick up if someone's being honest or not. I think if you're trying to convince yourself that someone's legit and being honest, or you like what they're saying and you convince yourself that it's real, even though you could tell that they were maybe lying to you, listen to your gut instinct when it comes to everything. There were circumstances throughout my journey where I felt like in the job search, people were more confused than they were letting on, less knowledgeable than I would like. Practices were not running as efficiently as I would like. And I was picky about that. And I encourage you to be picky about that too, because there are great offices out there. You just might have to be open to relocating like I did. So if you have any questions about finding an associate office, I know this is pretty timely because this is the time when a lot of fourth years are looking for an associate role. Or if you're already working and you're looking for a new place to go because you're not satisfied in your current role, send me a message. I'm happy to give you my thoughts about opportunities that you're considering and let you know what I think about them and anything you should maybe be clarifying before you say yes and sign on to an office. With all that said, I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode and supporting the show. If you are a fourth year listening, be sure to send this episode to one of your friends so that they can also be more prepared as they're looking for their associateship and where they're going to start their career. And I will talk to you all next Monday.